Nottoway was a staple in White Castle. I mean, everyone from all over the world came here to tour Nottoway. Just the history. I mean, this was built, in the Civil War. It stood this whole time, and now to see it just burned down, it's really sad.
Everybody have their own opinions on Nottoway, but it is, it is White Castle. It's one of the biggest slave plantations in Louisiana. It's historical. As White Castle, we have to think about the people, who's providing for their families.
As I watched the Nottoway Plantation burn, all I saw was stories. Stories that would never be told. Not that they were being told anyway. That place wasn't a museum. It wasn't preserving history. It was a wedding venue. A picture-perfect backdrop for couples who probably never thought twice about the stories hidden in the soil beneath their feet. But that's the problem with our history. Our stories are often word of mouth. They live and die with the people who tell them. And when we don't pass them down, they disappear, just like this plantation. But this isn't just about a grand old house burning down. It's about everything it stood for, everything it witnessed, everything we lost. Nottoway wasn't just some random mansion in the South. It was the largest antebellum mansion in the entire region. Now, antebellum just means before the Civil War. Built in 1859 by John Hampton Randolph, a wealthy sugar planter who came to Louisiana from Virginia. But Randolph was no newcomer to this brutal business. He already owned and operated other plantations in the region, including Forest Home, which he acquired in 1841. At first, Randolph made his fortune growing cotton, but by the mid-1850s, he saw the real money: sugar. Well, let's not sugarcoat it. Sugar plantations were among the most brutal. The work was relentless, the conditions deadly. The average life expectancy of an enslaved person on a sugar plantation, about 10 years. Nottoway was built with the labor of 155 slaves, men, women, and children who not only toiled in the sugarcane fields, but also molded the bricks, sawed the wood, and built a mansion with their own hands. We may not have all the stories we want, but we know for sure that the stories here could have never been sweet. And yet, just 2 years after Nottoway was completed, the Civil War broke out. Randolph, always a man chasing wealth, saw the writing on the wall. He fled to Texas with his slaves, trying to protect what he considered his property, leaving his wife and children behind at Nottoway to face the uncertainty of war. But even with the South in chaos, Nottoway survived. It survived the Civil War, Reconstruction, and even Hurricane Katrina. It stood as a reminder of a painful, complicated past. But it wasn't a place to learn that history. It was a moneymaker, a backdrop for weddings and luxury events, stories buried beneath a coat of fresh paint. And then, just days ago, it all went up in flames, a fire that moved fast, leaving nothing but ashes. No one knows what caused it. No answers, just questions. Some even noticed something strange. The infamous Annabelle, from that movie, made her first ever visit to New Orleans just days before the fire. Now, this is New Orleans, one of the most haunted cities in the country, so you can make of that what you wish. And whether the fire was an accident, something supernatural, or something else entirely, we haven't just lost a building. And I'm not just talking about the fire that happened the other day. I'm talking about a much bigger fire, a metaphorical fire that's been burning for centuries, a fire that's consumed our stories and our history because they were never written down. And that's why this page matters. That's why stories like this matter, because no other group has to fight so hard to find their history. Others can trace their roots on a family tree, but for us, we have to dig. And our digging is dangerous and frustrating, but necessary, because our stories are often passed down by word of mouth. And when we don't pass them down, they disappear, just like this plantation. History isn't just in the books. It's in our voices. It's in our stories.
The largest plantation in America just burnt down. Here's an example, another one, and another one. But that's not even the craziest part. Nottoway Plantation was a plantation resort. Could you imagine a Holocaust labor camp being a place you could get a spa day, a massage, and chill by the pool? Well, we don't got to worry about that anymore because Nottoway is gone. Let the tape roll.
what I find interesting about Nottoway? The trope. There is a specific trope that anybody who is descendants of slave owners will tell you. They were so good to them that they decided that if they were going to buy up one and they had a family, they would never separate them. They taught them how to read and write, how to make good choices and good decisions. The lady of the house would give up some of her precious cloths so that they would be able to wear them and sew them to be able to attend the parties that they had. Not all of them lived in the quarters. Some of them even had rooms in the master's home. Let me tell you something. After the Civil War had ended, there were tons of plantations everywhere, minus the ones that got burned down. But the people that owned the land there still had land rights and owned the land. Now we have the trope of carpetbaggers coming in and trying to move into properties because they were now sanctified by the union, meaning that the people that owned them didn't own them anymore. But that didn't happen all the time. Most of the time on these mega big plantations, the owners still got to keep it. And if any of the slaves weren't able to flee and they stayed there out of loyalty, that wasn't loyalty, it was you're staying here. They would divvy up the land and they would give it off to the people that were already working there, that were already enslaved there. But what people don't realize is these contracts that went on, they went on for ages. Oh yeah, you're free now. You're free. You still work for me though. And you're not paid. And you can have that land and that property and whenever I say you can. Oh, you had children? Well, now they'll get property too, but they have to live here and work. Do you see what I'm saying? So when you hear these alabaster bastards telling you about how the history of these plantations is so beautiful, and you hear these people talking about how they were so good. No, they weren't. It is a trope that they pushed on especially little kids in the South to make the little kids in the South believe that the people that they were descended from weren't terrible. Look, I'm old enough to be able to go through slave records now, okay? I had some nasty people on both sides of my family. And the creeks and things that I played in as a child, when I tell you that I pulled shackles and bottles and all types of shit out of it, I'm not fucking playing with you. I'm not fucking with you. Don't you dare go out here and believe a word of that. Remember, they had to cover up all the bad blood that they caused. They had to do something to be able to make it look like they were better than what they actually were, which was fucking evil. The way I see it is it's a cleansing and fire. The only people that should be able to even have that property at all are the people that were enslaved there. I think we ought to do that. Nobody wants to do reparations. I'll tell you what. How about we do this? That fucking cleanse by fire. Stop sitting here glorifying that bullshit. Oh, the flags and all the... I don't give a goddamn. When you're little and you think that it's alright to go to school wearing those flags, and when you're little and you think it's okay for you to go up to people who are not your skin tone and say some nasty shit because it's what you're taught, burn them all.
Burn! Burn! Don't call the fire department. Does anyone have any marshmallows? We should have a barbecue. Cheers, everyone.
Look at this photo and tell me what you see. If you see what looks like silhouettes of people on the second floor, you're not alone. There's also a video of what looks like someone walking around inside that I just recently came across. Now, if you don't know the significance behind this, or you just have no idea what I'm talking about, this is the Nottoway Plantation in Louisiana. It was built by enslaved people back in 1859, okay? And even after the plantation was done operating on the backs of enslaved people, it was then turned into what was, disturbingly enough, called a plantation resort. A plantation resort. A wedding venue. I don't know who would want to get married at a place with history like this, but just recently, on May 15th, it burnt to the ground. Now, they've investigated to find what the cause of the fire was, and they believe it was just electrical issues, but the photo that I'm showing you was snapped while it was engulfed in flames, and it had a lot of people talking. There are a lot of people that have been pointing out what looks like figures on the balcony of the top floor. And now I've been seeing a lot of comments saying that the souls of those enslaved people have finally been freed, and that we're being shown evidence of that by this photo right here.
So the Nottoway the family that owns the plantation, they have put out a statement that said, "We do not hold weddings here. We definitely don't do that, and we definitely have always paid homage to the history." And when they say it like that, they're making the leap that you're going to understand of slavery, but they're intentionally not using the word. So I believe that the family is trying to save face. And I have proof for that. So I am going to show you a couple of clips. The very first one is going to be like one of their tourism videos that they put out. And the second one is going to be a clip from one of their own tours. Now, I will tell you, your mouth is going to be on the floor during the second video. Just be sitting down. Nowhere in that promotional video is that place promoted as anything other than a very beautiful place to come and hang out. So this next clip is going to be of one of their tour guides giving a tour of the plantation, and she is doing exactly what everybody has been saying in the comments and what I was saying, which is glorifying this period of time and trying to shine the turd of slavery and make it sound like these were good slave owners. There are no good slave owners.
He had the most in this region,
Most slaves.
And that's because when he purchased a slave, if the slave had a wife and children, he'd buy the whole family so that they would never be separated. And so that was good for them. And then in the village, he built a cottage for each of those families so they didn't have to share with multiple families and squeeze into one space. So that was good too. They could hunt, they could fish, so they could buy for their own food. And they also built a hospital for them, and there was a doctor who would visit every week. And the doctor trained one of the slaves to be a nurse to take care of them. So from the readings that we have, it sounds like the slaves were treated fairly well as a slave can be treated, considering the conditions. When the war ended, the majority of the slaves stayed here. And we actually have descendants of the slaves who still work here today. Pretty amazing.
So I just want to clear up a couple of things in her little speech there. There are no good slave owners. Oftentimes, if you could afford it and you were a slave owner, they would purchase families together because they were less likely to run away. They didn't do it because they were good people. They built them hospitals and trained a nurse is not some charity that they were doing. The only reason that they made a hospital and that they trained a nurse to take care of them is because white physicians would not even touch Black people. The second reason is because they were chattel slavery, not wage slavery. So they were physical property of that slave owner. So if he breaks them, he has to buy to replace them, okay? Unlike the immigrant labor that was coming into the United States. In Kentucky specifically, you can drive around and you will see stone like fences that are built all over the place. Those were built by wage labor, okay, of immigrants that were coming into Kentucky. And the reason that they were built by them and not the slave labor is because it was actually more dangerous work. And if the plantation owner needed to get these fences built that way, it is better for them to use wage slaves versus their chattel slaves, because they have to replace their chattel, and the wage slaves were coming in on boatloads through Ellis Island. The next video I am going to show you is from the Underground Railroad Freedom Center. I live about 20 minutes away from Cincinnati, and I'm very, very lucky that we have this amazing facility here. And I am showing this video to highlight that there are no good slave owners.
Is a great time to reflect where we came from and where we're going. But what about where people were held? One of the central pieces of the National Underground Railroad Freedom Center is a slave pen, or a slave jail. I talked to the museum curators who let me in on the story that's still being uncovered about the nation's only standing slave pen.
There are a lot of powerful objects within this institution, particularly our slave pen. You can't find this anywhere else.
This is a slave pen, used essentially as a warehouse for enslaved people before they were sold 750 miles down the river to Natchez, Mississippi.
Cincinnati and the Freedom Center are uniquely positioned to be able to tell this history.
This is not a replica. This is an artifact, and it's the only one still standing. A wealthy Germantown, Kentucky resident, John W. Anderson, built this in 1832. He'd piled 30 to 50 people in here.
Women and children were down here.
Shackling the men on the second floor, waiting to be sold again.
What you're seeing here are stories of resilience. You're seeing stories of resistance.
In 1834, Anderson died, ironically chasing down someone who escaped from this very slave pen. The land fell into the hands of many owners thereafter.
The reason it's in the condition that it's in is because there was actually a barn built around it. And so you probably would not have known in passing that this structure even existed.
In 1998, the land's new owner, Raymond Evers, was ready to knock this down until he noticed the spikes on the top floor. Court records confirmed the building was, in fact, the rumored Anderson slave pen.
Bringing the slave pen into our building was such a feat and an effort in itself.
A group of expert preservationists undertook the Herculean task of taking it apart and building it back up on the banks of the borderland, which could take people from slavery to freedom.
It's not just of the physical structures themselves, but it's of the people as well that are attached to these histories and to these stories.
The museum added the names of the last known people held in Anderson's makeshift jail, centering the story around their experience. And because of them, the docents at the museum can share the whole story, no matter how hard it is to hear.
Our goal here is really to reveal that truth of American history. While it is a heavy story to tell, and it may be a difficult story to tell, it's so important.
You do not get to be the largest slave-owning family in any state without actively partaking in barbaric processes through the whole thing. You don't get to buy a whole family and say that you're doing something nice because you chose to keep them together. You don't get to bend history to make it sound like you were a benevolent God to these people. That's just not the truth of the situation.
Did you know that in the South, plantations are fully running and still occupied by tenants? This is Nottoway Plantation in White Castle, Louisiana, located in Iberville Parish. Nottoway was built in 1859 by a man by the name of John Hampton Randolph, who came from Virginia to buy slaves and mill sugar. Nottoway Plantation is 53,000 square feet, which makes it the largest antebellum plantation in the South. John Hampton Randolph owned 176 slaves. During the Civil War, this house was occupied by both Union and Confederate soldiers. Randolph died at the Nottoway Plantation in 1883, leaving it to his wife Emily, and it still stands today.
Lord Jesus, it's a fire. Fire. Woo, 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 woo. Nottoway Plantation down there right underneath Baton Rouge, home to 150-something slaves, is burning to the ground. Thank you, ancestors. Mind you, people love this God-forsaken, evil-ass place. Look at this place, it's the shit they got on this property, y'all. They got the nerve to call this fucking cursed ground a damn resort. It was owned by John Randolph. May he burn in hell continuously. And all his fucking family members. And I hope some of them on this page right now. I don't know if the ancestors wanted to remind us to keep up the good fight of faith or what. Nigga, I ain't never been so happy to see smoke billowing. God damn it. Look at the beautiful, beautiful footage. I know. Some of y'all say, Darian, this is a historical landmark. Fuck this historical landmark. Burn, baby, burn. That's where it's located. God bless you, ancestors. God knows I wish we could have been there to put something on the grill when this bitch burnt to the ground. Here's to many more burning up. Fire.
I've been walking with my face turned to the sun. Weight on my shoulders, a bullet in my gun. Oh, I got eyes in the back of my head, just in case I have to run. I do what I can when I can, while I can for my people.
To stay with me because there is some things about this resort and 4-star hotel that burned down that nobody is talking about, and my jaw was literally on the floor. It's very clear that it being a museum is not its main focus. It does seem like they've started giving tours again, but this is for weddings and events. They do have a history tab at a drop-down menu. The only thing you're going to find is a list of 16 majestic oak trees that are found on the property. These oak trees are named, and for a brief moment I was like, oh, are they named after enslaved people? Is this like a memorial? No, it's named after the 11 children of the enslaver. As I was combing through trying to find any information on the enslaved people here, this tab for cottages underneath where you can stay caught my eye. Each cottage has 2 individual units with a single covered porch and oversized rocking chairs, and I was like, oh my god, how tasteless to have something like that on the property given the history. No, I don't think these are fresh cottages. I think they repurposed cabins on site with welcoming beds and full amenities. Oh, thank God. Thank God my slave cabin comes with a hairdryer and an iron. There's at least one of these still around, but this is an unmarked photo. There is no information about this photo. In fact, the only time I saw anything that had anything to do with a person of color were these god-awful candelabras. With this burning down, we lost a haunted wedding venue at best, and it seems like a place that was literally like Airbnb-ing slave cabins. So.
But I told y'all, some plantation owners took their enslaved people and brought them down south, down here to places like Texas, including Louisiana, to keep them enslaved. That was the story for my second great grandfather, who was still a slave after the abolition of. His missus took him and the rest of them as he was a child and moved them on down here to Texas, where they continued to be enslaved. No idea that they had been emancipated. That was a story for a lot of enslaved people, a lot of our ancestors. Now listen here. Remember I told y'all, Nottoway Plantation, they had a lot of that going on in Louisiana. Now look here, look what I done found out. I'll go to this lady's page. Go to this lady's page. I think it was a year ago. She did a reading for the Nottoway Plantation. She didn't know what it was called, but she did a reading. She saw a picture of the house right here. Watch this video. She'll explain it to you. But I'm going to explain it to you, but she'll explain it to you too. Just so in this video, she says she saw when she did the reading of the house, she saw and felt some things that are horrific and that speak to the injustices that happened on this plantation. What she said was that she felt a smothering feeling, like a pressure in her chest, like she could not breathe. And she saw a hallway and a corner. Something felt weird and off about that corner. This is apparently the floor plans for the Nottoway. It's hard to really get an envision for what it really looked like when you see the house like this as floor plans. So I got some. A artist on Sims Resource decided to do a floor plan of all 3 levels of the Nottoway Plantation that we see here. So it's going to be a little bit more of an animated type, but you're going to get the gist of what room we're talking about. You can see by this here, we get a much better perspective of what the house actually looked like. Again, this is another floor in the Nottoway. And this is the particular floor right here, what we're going to be talking about, the kitchen staff. Artist was so gracious to actually list all of the amenities. This took them a week to design. You can see their tag right here. You can find them on Tumblr at Royal Sims 85. Amazing. Now back to this right here. What happened was this was a sugar cane plantation, one of the most violent, brutal plantations you could have been forced to labor on. Okay. Now when the Emancipation Proclamation happened, people were supposed to let their enslaved people go, right? But we know this did not always happen, as is the story with the Nottoway family. The people who owned this mansion and the plantation would not let them let go of their slaves, let them be free. So what they did was they hid them. They continued to keep them enslaved, right? They lied about it, and eventually they were caught for still having people enslaved. So instead of allowing their enslaved people to be free, what did they do? They hid them in a room in this very kitchen, 100 or more men, women, and children in a small room and locked them in there to die. And that is where they remained until the kitchen was renovated and covered up the whole history behind it to save face for the family and its reputation. Again, do yourself a favor, go watch this video if you want to know more about what she saw, what she experienced, why she was doing what she was doing, how she came about this information. It's so sad to hear, but this is so many stories for so many plantations in the South. We just haven't heard them yet. And I have a feeling this isn't the only plantation we're going to see go up in blazes. I don't know. I'm just saying. When people wonder why it is that we celebrate as African Americans seeing places like this turned into a resort and a wedding venue and a hotel set ablaze and we're clapping and applauding, think about the stories of the people who were forced to labor until they died on this land. This land is covered in the blood of our ancestors. This is our family's history. And this place did zero, zip, zilch, nada to honor those people. All they did was cover up the atrocities that they caused and the trauma that they instilled in the DNA of us and our ancestors.
Nottoway Plantation marketed itself as a luxury resort. On their website, they bragged that it was a gorgeous resort getaway with these beautiful trees, this, that, and the other. And then you go back and you find that video of, the tours that they were giving. They were bragging that their slaves were treated very well and that descendants of the enslaved still worked at the Nottoway Resort. Look at the location tag. It doesn't say Nottoway Plantation. It says resort. Let's look at the differences in how history is portrayed by, say, the Whitney Plantation, which I've discussed at length, that focuses on the experience of Black people, enslaved Black people, forced here and tortured here under chattel slavery, which is not the same thing as other ancient forms of slavery, no matter how bad people want to tell you that. It is very, very different. And there are people who benefit from you thinking that it wasn't that bad. Okay? Alexis, me, you can't tell, I am directly 6 generations removed from slavery. Okay? My grandfather's father's, it goes directly back. And I'm a white girl. Do you understand? Do you understand what happens when you don't know your history? Do you understand? And then there's people that are like, well, How are you not mad about the history? No, don't fucking play that bullshit with me, because you don't give a fuck about real history. Because if you did, you'd say, Alexis, I understand that you're a Louisiana archivist and historian, that you've made your whole entire life preserving our history. Can you help me learn a little more about it? Oh no? Oh no, you don't want that? Oh no, you love that books are being banned? Then you don't give a shit about history. I don't care. Alexis, I'd love to debate with you. No! The fuck? I have my degrees. I ain't doing shit. I will give you 16 different books you can look at right now. You don't want that? I got scholarly articles. You don't want that? I got primary sources. You don't want that? Then I don't give a fuck. Because you don't care. Not gonna waste my time or my energy. I am talking to the people who give a fuck and would like to know something. So if you don't care, fucking goodbye. Get a job.
I am walking, but I definitely just found this out, y'all. It is 6-something in the morning while I'm walking. But let me tell you, did y'all know, I think this is the last time I'm going to talk about that Nottoway Plantation. Goodness. In Louisiana, did y'all know that they turned those slave cabins into luxury stays for guest quarters? That's right, like where enslaved people once slept in fear and exhaustion, right? Tourists can now be invited to relax in the modern comforts under the same sun that once beat down the backs of bondage people. This wasn't just a stay. It was marked as an experience. But there's a question, can you truly rest in a place built for the unrest? Let's talk about it. Even though it's burnt down, y'all, did you know this? This is disgusting.
Upset with them right now.
So their ancestors would be upset that they are not taking pride in the work that was forced upon them for the benefit of somebody else while they were kept in bondage and degraded. Is that what you're saying? By the way, since you are so full of information, I'm sure you know the true history of the place now, don't you?
The scene behind me is a plantation house in Louisiana that is burned down. It's burning down in this video. But this is not just any plantation house. This was the largest antebellum plantation house in the South, owned by one of the richest enslavers in the South. This is the Nottoway Plantation in Louisiana. It was built by enslaved Africans in 1859. It was owned by this guy, John Randolph. Now, John wasn't even from Louisiana. He was from Virginia originally, but he came from a wealthy slave-owning family, and his dad was hired by the federal government to do something in Louisiana, and he moved with him. Now, originally, he wanted to make it into a cotton plantation, the same type of plantation that he was used to in Virginia. But he noticed that the climate in Louisiana was a lot different, so he changed it to a sugar plantation. And because of that, he ended up tripling his family's wealth. John Randolph enslaved 176 people. But the plantation house itself was built around the same time as the Civil War. John didn't want to fight in the Civil War. He was scared. So he sent 3 of his sons and he asked, how much money do I have to give to keep me out of this? and he was a huge financial backer of the Confederacy in Louisiana. When he realized that the Confederacy was losing, he left his wife in Louisiana, took 200 slaves, and went to Texas. Once the Civil War was over, he contracted with 53 bonded people, basically people that owed him money and were working to pay it off. It's just another form of slavery. He eventually died in 1883, and his wife eventually sold the plantation for $50,000. That's the equivalent of $1.9 million today. And now he has no legacy at all.
But see, here's the thing. I can't begrudge her for being that ignorant because they wasn't exactly spreading that word. Now, were they? We heard from a tour guide in my first story about Nottoway. I used to be a tour guide at Nottoway Plantation. Nottoway was not talking about history properly. They regularly threatened my job because I was, quote, too emotional about the historical context and slavery there. I was there from 2017 till 2020 when COVID hit. The amount of ridiculous nonsense that I had to talk about on that tour was overwhelming. But now we can actually see exactly how they framed it.
He had the most in this region, and that's because when he purchased a slave, if the slave had a wife and children, he'd buy the whole family so that they would never be separated. And so that was good for them.
Y'all heard her correctly. Y'all heard her correctly. She just said he had the most in the region because out of the good nature of his heart, he would purchase an entire family. So that was, you know, this was really the 5-star plantation right here is what I'm saying.
Then in the village, he built a cottage for each of those families so they could have a share with multiple families and squeeze into one space. So that was good too. They could hunt, they could fish, so they could buy for their own food. And they also built a hospital for them, and there was a doctor who could visit every week. And the doctor trained one of the slaves to be a nurse, to take care of them.
See, that was kind of like what they were saying in Florida about the skills that they learned. And really, they didn't charge her for that neither. You know what I mean? So she got that for free. Really, what I'm saying is this was a good deal. You know, this was as good a deal as was available in Louisiana at the time. And quite frankly, I believe some back pay is probably owed to the owners of the plant.
I've been trying to figure out how to approach this. But if you haven't seen this, this used to be this. And this is the Nottoway Plantation home, or was the Nottoway Plantation home in White Castle, Louisiana. And just the other day, it burnt to the ground. The cause of the fire is still unknown, but as you can see, it's a complete loss. And the reason I've been trying to figure out how to approach this is because, one, I'm in Louisiana, and there's been a great outpour of sadness for the loss of this legacy. And I wanted to make this video to remind everyone that that plantation home was built by slaves. And the owner was one of the wealthiest slave owners in the South. And when the home was completed, I think it said he had like 158 slaves. He had over 150 slaves when that home was completed, built but with slave labor. Sorry, I've recorded this a few times and I keep going way off the wall and I'm trying to hold it together because this man, and I was going to show his picture, I was going to show his name. That's not the legacy that is lost here, right? Like, he literally was one of the wealthiest slave owners, had, I think at one point I saw something, he had like 200 slaves. When the Civil War started coming into Louisiana and heading their way, not only did he pay to get out of going to war, he left his wife and children in Louisiana at the plantation to try and preserve it, and then he took all the slaves and went to Texas. And then it was turned into an event center where weddings are held, and a museum celebrating Southern grace. I don't know, I'm getting emotional. And we're gonna be sad that it burnt to the ground. And I didn't already say this, and I'm already over 2 minutes, so this is the last thing I'll say. There's plenty of videos out there with people talking about this. This was a sugarcane plantation. Not that if it was a cotton plantation it would be any better, but this man came from Virginia, where his family had cotton plantations, and he switched to sugarcane because of its profitability. And I think I read somewhere that he increased his family's wealth like 5 times over by switching to sugarcane. And sugarcane plantations were the worst kinds of plantations. They were grueling. The life expectancy on sugarcane plantations was low because they were out there cutting the sugarcane with machetes, and then they were boiling it down. And when I say they, I mean the slaves. They're the ones that built the financial backing to build a 53,000 square foot home with 64 rooms. And it was their labor and their skill that built all of the beautiful, intricate details of this property. And it was beautiful, it was stunning. But when it existed, when it was a museum, that was one of the things that was really controversial, was that they didn't fully, like, they acknowledged they were built by slaves, but they didn't fully go into what that meant. And then they continued for over 100 years, right, to continue to capitalize off of that slavery. So I think it looks fine.